One night, one pass, 10,000 men. That is what it cost Alexander the Great to learn that he was not invincible. Winter, 330 BCE. A narrow mountain pass in modern-day Iran, the Persian Gate. Alexander had defeated Darius twice. Persepolis, the heart of everything he came to conquer, was 3 days away. He walked his army into a trap. Boulders first, then arrows, then Persian infantry blocking the only exit. No room to form, no room to fight, no room to do anything except die or run. Alexander ran. The greatest conqueror in history ordered retreat. His men, who had followed him from Macedonia to the edge of the known world, who had never seen him lose, turned around and walked back out. That is what really happened. But here is what history never tells you. He did not win his way back in, so a shepherd did it for him. You just found the Clash of Ancients, where history stops lying to you. Subscribe and hit the bell, and drop a comment. Did you know Alexander the Great ever retreated? Yes or no? Here is what most accounts of the Persian Gate get wrong. They skip it. Not entirely. The battle appears in the histories, in the footnotes of Alexander's march to Persepolis. But it is treated as a minor interruption, a momentary obstacle that Alexander overcame through brilliance, a brief delay before the inevitable. The word retreat is used carefully, if at all. The casualties are mentioned without emphasis, and the shepherd, the man who actually changed the outcome, is named in some sources and forgotten in all of them. That is not the whole story, not even close. To understand what the Persian Gate actually was, you need to understand what Alexander believed about himself by the winter of 330 BCE. He was 25 years old. He had been king for 6 years. In those 6 years, he had crossed the Hellespont, defeated the Persian Empire at the Granicus River, broken Darius at Issus, taken Egypt, broken Darius again at Gaugamela. The greatest empire in the world had tried to stop him twice with its full military force, and twice he had broken it. His soldiers believed he was descended from Achilles. Some of them believed he was a god. Alexander did not discourage this. Here is what that belief had done to his army. And this is the part that makes the Persian Gate possible. An army that believes its commander cannot be beaten does not scout as carefully as it should. An army that has walked through Persia unopposed for months does not approach a mountain pass with the caution that mountain passes require. An army moving toward Persepolis, 3 days away, the symbolic heart of everything the campaign had been about, moves fast, moves confident, moves without the particular alertness that saves lives. They moved into the Persian Gate without adequate reconnaissance, and waiting for them, in the rocks above, in the walls built across the pass, in the positions that Ariobarzanes had chosen with the care of a man who understood that this was the only chance he was going to get, was a Persian force of between 25,000 and 40,000 men. Ariobarzanes was the satrap of Persis, the provincial governor of the Persian heartland. He had no relief army coming. Darius had already fled, already been abandoned by his own commanders, already reduced to a fugitive in his own empire. There was no cavalry riding to the rescue. There was no political solution available. And here is what that means. Ariobarzanes knew all of this. He knew Darius had already run. He knew no help was coming. He knew that holding the pass was not a strategy that led to survival. It was a strategy that led to one outcome, and one outcome only. He chose to stay anyway. There was only the pass, and what he could do with it. He had prepared it thoroughly. A wall built across the narrowest point, not improvised but constructed, designed to stop an army. Positions in the rocks above for archers and for the men who would roll the boulders. infantry placed at the exit to cut off retreat if the opportunity arose. He had built a killing ground. And Alexander, the undefeated, the invincible, the man his soldiers believed the gods protected, walked straight into it. But here is what none of this explains yet. Why, after the retreat, Alexander did not simply take the longer road around the mountains to Persepolis. He could have. The city would still have fallen. The war would still have been won. He didn't take the longer road. And the reason why tells you everything about what kind of man he actually was. The pass killed men before they understood what was happening. That is the detail the histories smooth over. They describe the ambush in tactical language, positions, formations, projectiles. What they do not fully capture is the physical reality of what it means to be inside a narrow mountain pass when boulders begin falling from above. There is no response to it. None. A Macedonian soldier trained for years to hold a pike in a phalanx formation, to advance in disciplined ranks, to respond to cavalry and infantry in open ground. That training is completely useless when a boulder the size of a cart is falling toward him from 100 feet above. He cannot form up. He cannot charge. He cannot retreat fast enough. He can only be hit or not be hit, and the difference between those two outcomes has nothing to do with his skill or his courage. The boulders came first, then the arrows, from positions above that the Macedonians could not reach and could barely see. Then the Persian infantry at the far end of the pass, blocking the forward exit, cutting off any possibility of pushing through. Alexander's army was caught in a corridor with no way forward, and death falling from above. He assessed it quickly. That is one thing the sources agree on. Alexander was not slow to recognize when a situation was irretrievable. He ordered the withdrawal. The army that had never retreated turned around in a narrow mountain pass, which is itself a dangerous and difficult maneuver, and marched back out. The casualties were significant. Ancient sources give inconsistent numbers. Modern historians debate the precise figure. What is not debated is the scale. This was not a skirmish, not a minor engagement, not the kind of loss that could be absorbed without acknowledgement. Men died in numbers that mattered, and Alexander knew it. He set up camp outside the pass, and here is the moment the histories rush past, the moment that reveals more about Alexander than any of his victories. Alexander had told his soldiers he was descended from Achilles. He had let them believe he was touched by the gods. He had built an entire identity, his own and theirs, on the certainty of his invincibility. And now he was walking back out of a mountain pass with dead men behind him. What do you say to an army that believed you were invincible after you have just proved you are not? Alexander said nothing. He acted. He did not make speeches. He did not explain. He began preparing, immediately that same evening, for what he was going to do next. Because the only answer to a question like that is not words. It is the thing that happens after. He needed a way around the pass. What he found, or rather, who found him, is the part history almost forgot entirely. A local man. The sources call him a shepherd or a prisoner, or a guide. The accounts differ on the details but agree on the essential fact. He knew a path through the mountains, a narrow track, hidden, passable in winter if you knew where to look, that bypassed the Persian gate entirely and came out behind Ariobarzanes' position. This man, whose name was not recorded by Arrian or Curtius or Diodorus or any of the historians who preserved Alexander's story, changed the course of the battle, possibly the course of the campaign. The anonymous knowledge of one local person offered or extracted in the cold outside a mountain pass gave Alexander back what the Persian gate had taken from him. That detail deserves to sit with you for a moment, because everything that follows, the flanking maneuver, the destruction of the Persian force, the fall of Persepolis, flows from that unnamed man's decision to show a foreign conqueror a path through his own mountains. Alexander did not conquer the Persian Gate with genius alone. He conquered it with someone else's knowledge of the ground. Stay with me, because what happens next is the part nobody talks about, and it changes everything you think you know about this battle. The night before the flanking maneuver was bitterly cold. The Zagros Mountains in winter are not forgiving terrain. The elevation, the wind, the ice on the rocks, these are physical realities that the histories mention briefly and the soldiers experienced completely. Alexander's army camped outside the Persian Gate in conditions that added physical suffering to the psychological weight of what had just happened. Inside that camp, the mood was something that Alexander's army had never had to manage before. Defeat, not catastrophic defeat. The army was intact, functional, capable of fighting. But the particular psychological weight of having retreated, of having turned around in a pass while men died around them, of having marched back out without achieving what they went in to achieve. That was new. These were men who had been told and had come to believe that they were following someone the gods favored. The Persian Gate had introduced a question that had not existed before. What if they weren't? Alexander understood this. The sources that describe his behavior in the camp that night, moving through it, speaking to his officers, making the preparations for the night march, describe a man who had made a decision and was communicating it through action rather than words. The decision was not to wait, not to go around, to go back, tonight. The night march itself was the answer to the question the Persian Gate had raised. On the other side of the mountains, Ariobarzanes held his position. He had won. He knew it. The most famous army in the world had retreated from his pass, and he had held the ground they retreated from. What he did not know, could not have known because the path was not something he had guarded, was that the local knowledge of one unnamed man was about to make his position irrelevant. He had no warning of what was coming. He had no time to prepare when it arrived. Stop for a moment. Before the night march, before the flanking maneuver, before the destruction of the Persian force. Think about the unnamed shepherd. He knew these mountains. He had walked that path, the hidden track above the Persian Gate, probably many times in the way that people who live in mountains know every route through them without thinking about it. And then, one night, outside a mountain pass, in the middle of a war that was not his war, he was brought before Alexander the Great, and he made a decision. We do not know what motivated him. Money, fear, some calculation about which side was going to win. We do not know his name. We do not know what happened to him after. What we know is that without him, without that one unnamed man's knowledge of his own ground, Alexander does not get back through the Persian Gate. Not that night. Maybe not at all. History remembers Alexander. Who remembers him? The night march began in silence. Alexander divided his force. A holding contingent stayed visible outside the Persian Gate. Fires lit, enough activity to suggest the main army was still camped, still waiting. Meanwhile, Alexander took his best troops onto the hidden path the shepherd had shown him. In winter, at night, through mountain terrain that even in daylight would have been difficult. The sources describe the march in terms that make clear how serious the conditions were. Cold that went through armor, ice on the rocks, a path narrow enough that men had to move in single file, slowly, without torches that might be seen from the Persian positions below. Hours of this, moving blind through a mountain in the dark, trusting a local guide's knowledge of ground that Alexander had never walked before. This is the part the histories call Alexander's genius. It was, but it was also the shepherd's knowledge. and the soldiers' willingness to follow their commander into a mountain at night after a day of retreat. Genius is never one person. It is always a collection of decisions made by people whose names we mostly do not record. The flanking force came out behind the Persian position before dawn. Ariobarzanes had no warning. His army, which had held the pass, which had beaten the greatest military force in the world, woke to find the enemy behind them. The pass they had been defending was now a trap for the defenders. The wall they had built meant nothing when the enemy was already through the mountains. Alexander hit the rear. The holding force hit the front. The Persian army, caught between two forces in a position designed for defense from one direction only, broke. Ariobarzanes fought. The sources are consistent. He did not run immediately, did not surrender. He fought with what he had until what he had was gone. Then he fled with a small force into the mountains. He died there. The Persian gate was open. Alexander marched to Persepolis. Persepolis fell without a fight. The treasury, one of the largest accumulations of wealth in the ancient world, was taken intact. Alexander sent it back to Macedonia. The war was effectively over. And then Alexander burned Persepolis. The palace complex, built across generations by Persian kings, was set on fire. Whether this was a deliberate political act or a drunken decision has been debated for 2,000 years. What is not debated is that it happened. The city that Ariobarzanes had died trying to protect was burned by the man who took it. That is the irony the Persian gate leaves behind. Ariobarzanes held the pass, bought time, inflicted the only genuine tactical defeat of Alexander's career, died fighting rather than running, which is more than his emperor Darius managed, and history gave him almost nothing. His name appears in footnotes. The Cold Open asked, "What does it cost Alexander the Great to learn he is not invincible?" 10,000 men, one night, one pass, and here is the honest answer. Alexander's greatness was real. His tactical mind, his speed of decision, his willingness to attempt a night march through a mountain after a day of retreat. These are genuine, not myth, documented. But the Persian gate also revealed something the myth prefers to ignore. The greatest conqueror in history needed a shepherd to show him the way. An unnamed man whose motivation we do not know and whose fate we cannot confirm made the difference between Alexander being stopped and Alexander taking Persepolis. Genius and anonymous assistance. These are not opposites in history. They are almost always found together. We remember one, we forget the other. The Persian gate still exists. The pass in the Zagros Mountains, narrower than most people imagine, colder than the histories suggest, is still there. The wall Ariobarzanes built is gone, but the ground is the same ground. When you imagine yourself in that pass, looking up at where the boulders came from, understanding there is no tactical response to what is falling on you, what do you feel? And when Alexander ordered retreat, and the man next to you turned around for the first time, does something shift in how you think about the man you have been following? If this video changed how you think about Alexander, subscribe to the Clash of Ancients. We find the battle's history simplifies and pull them apart. Share this with someone who thinks they know the ancient world, and drop a comment. Did Alexander win at the Persian gate, or did a shepherd win it for him? This has been the Clash of Ancients. Some passes remember what was lost in them longer than the men who survived them, and I will see you in the next one.